Today on the X-Files, we take a look at one of Shonen Jump's most magical manga, a series full of whimsy, ancient dragons, super powerful wizards, and a snowman who's positively adorable. Let's boot up this file. Full name, Ginka Glüna. Created by Shinpei Watanabe. Start date, September 12th, 2022. End date, April 10th, 2023. Total chapters 29, split into 4 volumes with 2 bonus chapters. For the English translation, we can thank Satsuki Yamashita and Casey Lowe. For lettering, we have Steve Dutro. Design is by Kami Lee, and editing is by John Bay. As usual for most modern Jump manga, you can find them on the Shonen Jump app, complete with their digital volume release. Shinpei Watanabe is a relatively new artist, which we don't know much about, having used other pen names in the past, though through little excerpts in Ginka Glüna, we know that they've submitted ideas for numerous one-shots as well as series they've put their all into, which sadly usually end up getting rejected. Going backward in their career, they would submit Social Game to the 117th Treasure Newcomer Manga Award, which was some kind of bizarre battle manga where kids fight with various monsters in games which seems linked to trouble in their everyday lives. We would then see Watanabe put out 2 more one-shots in 2019 in Jump Giga issues, Fumetsu Reikon Honebi-chan and Sugimagi no Makai, with them later going on to work as an assistant on Mago-chan God of Destruction within Weekly Shonen Jump. Bundled in with the volumes of Ginka Glüna is a one-shot which came out a year before in Shonen Jump issue 21-22 of 2021. This would be named Peko Peko Disease or Extremus Appetitus in English. The one-shot sees Rinosuke Kashiwagi, a high schooler with a peculiar condition. He can't stop eating, and it's not just food but everyday objects like his school desk and even the environment he lives in. Nothing seems to quell his hunger, however, which leads him into a bizarre battle-like scenario where he faces off against another disease user. This is Watanabe at his strongest. It's full of ambitious spreads depicting the otherworldly in a fun way. Couple this with the one-shot's general idea, and I feel like it's proof that he's a really interesting and imaginative author, something that also comes across in his first series, Ginka Glüna, which we'll dive into now. Our story begins high up in the peaks of a snowy mountain. A young girl, Luna, lives there all alone. The closest thing she has for company being small animals and the little snowmen she makes. Thinking one day that a bear is rummaging through her stores, she discovers one of these snowmen has actually come alive. He calls himself Ginka, who remains elusive about his origins. As they bond and begin to live with each other, the snowman teaches her magic, something Luna is enamored by. The possibilities wielding magic are endless. It could help Luna live her life much more comfortably, helping her start fires or catch fish, indispensable in the cold wintry climate she lives in. It could also let her fly through the skies, go on adventures across the world, and do all kinds of other things she would never have dreamed of. From its inception, Ginka Glüna puts a lot of weight on magic, what it is capable of doing, and what it could represent for those trying to learn it. As Luna learns magic, years fly by. She becomes a full-fledged mage, and more of the world is revealed to us. This isn't a strict fantasy setting, as nearby on the mountains, a talking deer shows Luna the site of a great magical battle of old. Residual magic hangs heavy in the air, what seems to be the bones of ancient creatures and mechanical constructs float about too. Constrained to the mountain for years, all the training has manifested in Luna attaining the ultimate freedom under Ginka's tutelage. The freedom to leave the mountain as well as to break the rules of the known world, including the laws binding Ginka to a body of a snowman. Simply, she prevents him from melting, so they can go on a grand adventure together in an attempt to find Ginka's original body. The core premise is pretty simple, with the series hiding a lot of initial secrets away from readers. This may have been a mistake, which we'll dive into later, though I think Ginka Glüna makes up for that somewhat with sheer spectacle. It bombards you with magical creatures and vistas, all accompanied by its 2 main characters who are a lot of fun. Ginka is the most mysterious, clearly having a lot of backstory that leaks out of him over time. Though however serious it may be, he always approaches any given scenario with a level of fun or snark. He bounces off of Luna well, acting as a teacher, though also harbours a level of irresponsibility that makes this pair feel free and messy despite their student and teacher dynamic. Luna over time has morphed into this being of pure freedom, ever curious, ever growing. In one of my favourite moments earlier on, when she's confronted by a rather evil dragon that eats humans, she gets mad, not at it eating humans, but for it staying in the same place all the time, despite being able to fly anywhere with its wings. This introduces a core idea of Ginka and Luna, that magic is so vast, human creativity is so vast, so you should make something that has never been made before. To its credit, the manga itself also tries its best to adhere to this code, always throwing weird, cool, or wacky things illustrated to great ability across its pages. It often comes at the cost of hampering readability. The initial chapters of Ginka and Luna are adventurous, though not well structured, feeling like very loose vignettes, even inside of individual chapters, with transitions being rather confusing. As the manga progresses, things do get more consistent as characters join the cast, like the magicians Beretta and Anemone, two magic trainees who are both doing various quests in order to rank up within the Magician's Guild. Ginka and Luna are also doing these quests as well, though mostly for money, and all four characters eventually intersect when they take a job to rescue a number of trapped people from within an abandoned magical mine. I again feel compelled to gush over Watanabe's artwork as they make the mine feel like a fun and magical place. It twists and turns with its minecart tracks, and its bizarre inhabitants make it feel unique and dangerous. The focus here is mostly on the new cast though, and how they interact with Luna. Beretta radiates a lack of confidence in herself, doing what she can though often throws disparaging remarks toward herself, like her saying she's useless. Anemone is almost the opposite. Full of fire, she tries to take everything on herself and is fueled by rage, but at points this manifests itself as self-hatred, stemming from past events where she wasn't strong enough to save people whom she lost in the past. In both cases, these are characters chained down by their feelings, notably their self-worth, which they attach to their magical skill. Luna isn't affected by such feelings. She radiates strength, especially in a magical sense, but also through her fun, loving personality. She's someone who clearly enjoys the process of learning, discovering new things, and even failing to an extent. At least to me, I can relate this focus on acquiring magical strength to art and getting better at drawing, though I feel this is applicable to anything you may struggle with. It's important to enjoy the process of learning and doing. If you get absorbed in your failures or your perceived lack of skill and keep being harsh to yourself without meaningful reflection, you'll stagnate and won't ever grow. I think this message is perfect for what the series is exploring through magic. It pushes for its characters to be free and have fun. So interweaving this light narrative where these two characters struggle with their own self-doubt and inner issues adds this more relatable element to Ginka and Luna. Beyond being exuberant, there needs to be this human element to ground it. Another thing the mine arc does is introduce us to how Ginka is going to get his body parts back, which manifest themselves in the form of mini Ginkas, each with a different element and also consciousness and personality. They also represent different portions of Ginka's memory, with each mini Ginka representing a different age Ginka was at, like the rock Ginka being him at 9 years old. This is an interesting concept, though sadly it never really gets explored all that much, with us not meeting any other mini Ginkas, leading to this development not really going anywhere. The general concept does tie into some later ideas though regarding memory and personality, but I'll put a pin in that for now. After rescuing the people from the mine, the crew's next goal is to visit the Magical Guild to attain more info on the whereabouts of the other mini Gins. There are other mages there who would have known Ginka, which excites Luna at the prospect of learning more about them. This sparks a new journey to Planet Peak, the highest mountain in the world. The climb isn't the only thing they need to worry about though, as they're attacked by mages, Karula and their trainees, Hugin and Mugen. While the latter two children are no trouble for Luna, the fight with Karula is a lot of fun and much more dangerous. This is again due to how playful the series' use of magic is, and not just in a visual sense. Ginka and Luna actually has its own runic magic system, where each spell is accompanied by a word or phrase. This is Varokian magic, a structured magic much like a language, with more complicated characters resulting in more complex spell effects. Already, these are pretty complicated even for basic things like the runes for sword or go, two that can be combined to shoot a flying magic sword for instance. though immediately we see Karula chain together Agate Steed, Spatial Rupturing, and Treasured Blade, breaking the system and taking it to its limits immediately. Ginka and Glüna has no real interest in taking us from underdog to the top. We go straight into the upper echelons of the magical world, where it's at its most interesting and fun. Building onto this, Glüna doesn't use these symbols or Varokian magic, though she does pick up on it a little throughout the series. I find this interesting as Luna's dark magic is unbound, like her, and it seems as though Varokian magic as a system was designed to limit, though perhaps through its limitations it makes casting spells more focused. The difference between the two magic systems and how it's commented on, Luna's magic being more primal and pure, reeks to me of this distinction that one represents freedom and another a measured, controlled form. Ginka eventually interrupts this fight, having known Karula from the past, and we continue on to the Magical Guild, where it's noted a few magicians will kill Ginka on sight. Despite this, they make a flashy entrance via dragon, and Watanabe continues to impress with his bizarre depictions of Ginka and Luna's worlds. Planet Peak is full of impossible feeling spaces, orbiting miniature planets with the whole thing so high up in the sky that the stars are visible. Then we get glimpses into some of the denizens of the Magical Guild like Scheherazade and their Frankenstein-esque lab. Glüna meets them in the guild's grand library, and sure, a lot of interesting comments and observations are made. Firstly, this one's a bit of a blink and you'll miss it line, but the younger mages and their mini Emperata remark about a book that every magician reads when they're young. Glüna, however, has no such experience. I feel like this small comment illustrates more than her just being different than other magicians. You can parallel this to a self-taught individual versus one who has been schooled in anything. This may also conjure the idea of Glüna being a genius or a prodigy too, though I don't think the series really takes this angle. What I see here is more a focus on how isolating this dialogue is, with Glüna having walked a different and more solitary path than her new friends. Glüna is someone who had to learn mostly on their own, and it leads into her thinking about the loss of her mother and subsequently the feelings surrounding that, which would be loneliness. Beyond her freewheeling personality and boundless creativity lies a lot more depth than I anticipated. One of the lines reiterated beforehand by Karula also adds on to this. You fight with all you've got. Everything you can muster, that way if you lose, you won't have any regrets. I think this can be viewed in a positive and healthy way. Stripped of past sadness, with nothing to lose, Glüna lives with all she has, so in the end she can be happy. As part of this though, there is an aspect of self-destruction, which will become further evident as we progress throughout the series. In reflection, Glüna's character is built upon throughout the series, and I don't think it's really obvious on a first read, but on a reread there are these little moments that clue you into her character and the mystery surrounding her. It's still a little vague, but there is a sense there. There's depth there to Glüna, which I really appreciate. This library section also gives us some more lore and great illustrations focusing on the magic of this world. The page where magic pours out of one of the books really sticks with me. It epitomizes the series' magic. It's tangible, ever-growing, and brimming with energy. I know I've brought it up many times, but it's very important I get across how well Watanabe illustrates things, in particular the manga's environments, magic, and this sense of wonder. As part of this lore drop on Varokian magic and wands, finally Scheherazade, or Hera as I'll be calling her from now because her name is way too hard to pronounce, appears. Building on the concept of Varokian magic here, it was intended to be a sort of stripped down sort of magic, intended on making it easier to use. The words or runes depicted are actually closer to poetry apparently, which fits nicely into how magic is described as the caster communicating with the magical energies of the world to make them do their bidding. The poetic nature of this is exceptionally appealing to me. This communication is more about telling a story, to express a belief and emotion, to conjure an equal reaction through magical energies. This may explain why Glüna can so adeptly wield her dark magic. It is an extension of her natural curiosity and desire to be free. Those emotions are so strong they manifest in strong and creative magical spells, ones that are unlike anything she or anyone else has ever seen. Hera exhibits the same core principle in a very different way. After talking about these magical principles, she puts the book they were reading, The Fundaments of Magic, back in the wrong place. Sternly, she pushes back against moving it to its intended position, stating that it's beautiful in the wrong place. Would not the sky be more beautiful if it were yellow? Wouldn't Beretta look more beautiful with no head? Her philosophy is one of difference, chaos, change, as she states, "Why should the world be as it is and not how I wish it to be?" A selfish and avaricious statement, and following the logic we use to explain Luna's magic, an exceptionally dangerous one. She focuses on the power to change, pervert, and transform anything to what she wishes, beckoning Luna into a battle by flashing a tome that would aid Ginka and Luna in their quest. The battle with Hera is probably one of the high points of the series. It's flashy, enjoyable, and has all the energy of you running into a boss or enemy in a game that vastly outlevels you. Her magic is illustrated in this dark and twisted way as she contorts the bodies and flesh of others. She holds a shadowy mirror up to Luna, as both are magicians who embody freedom, though one does so selfishly, involving others in their schemes, treating them like toys. Throughout this arc, and the entire series really, there is a focus on the idea of change. You can see this through Hera and her abilities, but also it's relayed through Ginka and Luna defeating her and the growth the two have gone through. While Hera maintains an outlook that only the strong should remain and change the world to what they envision, there's a certain kindness that Ginka and Luna bring to the table in their dialogue during this fight. That even slow, steady change is better than no change, that with time, someone weak can become strong if they keep trying and are open to evolving. Hera may embody change, mostly through her magic, but has actually never changed herself, only ever forcing external change to suit her needs. She's never properly adapted or grown, which has led her to this limited worldview. She misses the forest for the trees and is ultimately defeated by a very simple trick of perception. Ginka and Luna is a pretty fast-paced adventure, but I do like that it takes some time here to push its views. They do seem a little ill-fitting, especially when the main duo are uber powerful, fast-learning magicians at the top of their field, though I think some level of comfort can be derived from the people at the top being inclusive and encouraging a nurturing environment. It also highlights why these two are so strong. They are flexible to change. They don't fear it, but embrace it in order to amplify their craft. Neither limit themselves when it comes to magic in an external or internal sense. Boundaries are shattered before them, and nothing holds them back. After the fight with Hera, we're then introduced to Methuselah, the guildmaster of the Magicians Guild, who thanks the group for apprehending the Mad Mage. We get some lore here about how over time, many senior magicians consumed by greed and power have taken to seeing all of humanity, those without magic, as beneath them, asserting themselves as leaders or terrorizing people in magical experiments, which may explain why the world feels so chaotic and ruptured. We sadly never get to see the full extent of this, though the illustrations of some of these corrupt magicians fascinates me to no end, and I think this is a great setup for future arcs. Coupled with this is those mages likely having pieces of Ginka's body too, so the core setup of the series is cemented here, though perhaps it's a little too late as we're already on the 3rd volume. The next leg of Ginka and Luna may be its weakest, seeing the cast split with Ginka and Luna saying goodbye to the trainee magicians in favour of a new character, a warrior named Locke, who has a pretty annoying personality, disliking anyone who uses magic except his master. We're also relegated to a small town setting, which isn't nearly as interesting as what's come before, with the group set to investigate some shady goings on. Everything at this village seems well at first, perhaps a little too well, as everyone is enamored with a local flute-playing magician named Nosferatu, who has blessed them with a bountiful harvest. With that particular name, it's quite obvious he isn't a good guy and is revealed to be the antagonist of this arc. Luna and Locke have a fight against some other dark magicians that isn't too notable, but is pretty cool, and Ginka goes to confront Nosferatu, who, it's revealed, is trying to revive Mangaka, an ancient magician and enemy of Ginka that's been teased throughout the story. At this point, cancellation loomed over the series, so it picks up somewhat, with the manga revealing all sorts of cool things, like Varokia being this massive technically advanced city that launched an artificial moon, introducing more science fiction elements into the series. We also get a pretty raw backstory for Nosferatu, of a boy with no emotions trying to chase them, and in doing so he beats his own dog to death. There's some interesting parallels here to Luna and this whole idea that deep emotion, especially loss and love, can help provide magicians with the power necessary to become great mages. But artificially manufacturing such events, like Nosferatu has done, leads to a magician of a much more twisted caliber. Unable to amass enough magical energy by himself, he opts to use humans like an emotional battery to facilitate his resurrection of Mangaka, intent on creating a festival of despair, bringing humans from the peak of happiness to their very depths in one instant. Of course, our heroes foil this plan, but with the series cancellation close by, Watanabe decided to go out with a bang. The fear of death imprinted on Nosferatu is enough to kickstart the resurrection ritual, and crawling out of his mouth in this beautifully visceral scene is Mangaka. This is probably one of the most memorable villain introduction scenes I've seen within Jump, so the series gets a lot of props for that from me. Mangaka is also a pretty interesting character, again paralleling himself to Luna and this series' central ideas. They are not a being that's evil on the outset, with the first thing they do post-resurrection being remarking on how wonderful and beautiful the world is. Mangaka is a being of wonder, much like Luna. I think they exhibit a similar fascination with the world and magic, though in Mangaka's case this is taken to the extreme, with them wanting to be alive and able to experience everything forever. This brings me to perhaps the single most important idea the series attempts to tackle, which I don't think it conveys in the most clear way. This curiosity and fascination with the world, appreciating it for all it's worth. This is only possible due to limitation, and not in the sense of imagination. It's good to branch out and explore every single angle you can, but it's all made special because there's a limit on our time and our bodies. We will eventually pass on, making every second we spend learning and growing valuable. When you remove that restriction, at least in Mangaka's case, you're left with a bit of a black hole, something that wants to know and experience everything in such vast quantities. It transforms these noble desires into something caustic and selfish. It consumes without rhyme or reason, with no emotion. As a final boss, Mangaka is far too powerful. Neither Ginka or Luna stands a chance, so Luna tries something drastic. The biggest differentiating factor between her and Mangaka is how she is grounded by her humanity and connections to others. She never put her curiosity above the life of another and always does her best to help those she can. An idea the series plays around with is the more you learn, the more numb you risk becoming. In the case of Luna, she mentions learning magic has helped her evade feelings of cold. It's opened up mysteries like how to talk to animals, and she's more stalwart emotionally. These all seem like cool things, but the more you learn and experience, the less new things become. The everyday becomes less special, and you chase greater satisfaction. This process is likely what turned Mangaka into what they become, and has propelled several other mages into the greedy beings they are now. This could act as a commentary for all kinds of things. Addiction definitely stands out as one, though I find it's commenting a lot more on the idea of human limits. With mortality, it still gives us a reason to appreciate all we can while we can, and as part of how Luna was raised, through Ginka, there's a hard line that was never crossed. Way back at the beginning of the story, her mother did die, and Luna was a lonely girl, set to learn magic, though not to escape or help with life on the snowy mountain, but to bring her mother back. But if that was something you could do so readily, death would have no meaning. It would cheapen life. It would cheapen our connections with others. If an external force alters those things, then they become less genuine. In media, magic is often seen as this wondrous thing, but often these stories will have taboo magic, usually related to resurrection, memory alteration, or turning back time, things that can drastically alter a person forcibly. Partially, this is often due to it disturbing the natural order of humanity, but I think it's also because it disturbs the social codes that connect us and make us who we are. If we can snap our fingers and make people act or feel how we want them to, then are we really communicating with another person, or is this just another form of loneliness? I bring this up because Ginka and Luna then toys with another one of those taboo magics, memory magic. This is magic that transforms valuable memories into magical power. Unable to go on living as a child, Luna wasting away was taught this magic by Ginka in the hopes that her sorrow would turn into great magical power, giving us an explanation of why she's so adept with magic. This also places further importance on human lived experience, our memories, and connection. I feel memory can be viewed as internally crystallized emotion. It's all the thoughts and feelings we have given this ethereal form, and since the magical system in Ginka and Luna is so focused on stories and communication, remember Varokian magic being these verses of poetry initially intent on telling stories, I feel it's appropriate that by sacrificing your own stories, aka your memories, they'd act as a great source of power. This is then the only way to beat Mangaka, a sacrifice of memory of all the precious knowledge and experience Luna has amassed. With more build-up, I think this reveal would have hit a lot more, as throughout the series the idea of how important memory and how it intersects with identity was tackled. The minigins would have likely been a strong example of this. Even so, what we have at the end of the series is still quite interesting and worth pondering about. It presents all memories as valuable in some way, even those filled with sorrow. They can be used as fuel to push you further. Painful memories can inform you just as much as happy ones, but with all memories, they are something you can move on from, an idea this later moment tackles too, through Luna accepting her mother's death and moving forward, knowing through her adventures that the future can become a brighter place. The final act memory loss is often used as a cheap way to elicit an emotional response in a story. I remember it happening in a lot of various series, and usually they tend to suck as very quickly the memories are returned. But after Luna's sacrifice, all of her memories are gone for good. We get to see how they manifest in different attacks she uses though. Unconsciously they leak out, now existing in magical form. The flowers she picked with Ginka, the fish they caught together, and the hat and scarf she gifted him, now transformed into different magical attacks, and gone forever. It's shown that she has so many memories with Ginka, so many that surely she would never run out, though she attacks and attacks. Ginka's name becoming blurred within the text of the series itself, until all she can say is goodbye to a friend she doesn't even know anymore. The battle ends and all that Luna can muster to her comrade is a faint, "Who are you?" Ginka's backstory is shown after this, giving us info that Mangaka, as a creepy hare, was entangled with him, acting as a mentor of sorts, or perhaps even a puppet master. I don't quite feel its integration was handled perfectly, and it's a bit strained, but understandably so due to the series' imminent cancellation. It does enrich the main antagonist somewhat, as well as Ginka, and provides a frame of reference to his emotional state. He's often freewheeling and silly, but also harbors a deep sadness within himself, having made many mistakes in the past, and now seeing what happened to Luna, he feels he's made yet another mistake. This leads to him keeping Luna at arm's length and not wanting to make another mistake by involving himself with her again. He's scared of hurting others, so scared he'd rather not interact with them again at all and be lonely. He, like Luna, was also tormented by a past loss, likely the reason he taught her memory magic in the first place, not wanting her to be like him. But the series urges us to feel. These sad parts of our lives are just as important as the happy ones and give us perspective, but it's important to take a step back and assess them. Are we being fair to ourselves with our memories? Are we being weighed down by them and the potential guilt of things beyond our control? How we remember is just as important as what we remember. Sometimes we forget or reassess as well. It's a crucial part of being human. I like how much emphasis the series puts on this, and in the end, even with great effort, the cast aren't able to return Luna's memories back. Now and again she gets flashes of the past, but the series puts a lot of stress into Ginka making new ones with her, as in starting again from the very beginning. It's a bittersweet end that I feel leverages the idea of the final act loss of memory, as memory and human experience have been ingrained into the series in numerous ways, from a character writing perspective to its magical system. It also makes no attempt to cheapen the end with Luna getting her memories back, but still looks forward with hope and an attitude that things can return to a nicer place. Something which gets reinforced in its volume-only bonus chapters, which are a treat if you're a fan of the series who was reading back when it was first serialized. While the end is certainly rocky, with plot points and ideas unresolved or underexplored, there is a strong emotional core to its conclusion, which I can't deny did bring me to some tears while rereading. Now, having gone through the story once again, I can safely say that Ginka and Luna is one of the densest series I've covered in this format. While not all of its ideas reach a solidified point, there's so much to play around with and think on. We have the idea of memory, which I discussed at length, the importance of it, how sad memories can hold us back or propel us forward, how important memory is in a general sense, as well as how it connects us to others. There's explorations of human nature through magic, of how and why things come to be taboo, of our limits as humans, and how those make our lives and memories that much more special. In a similar vein, I feel like imagination is connected to all of this too. The bounds and expanses of our minds, memories and creativity, it all intersects. Ginka and Luna preaches openness and optimism, the desire to be idealistic and unbound by restrictions. These ideas are fragmented throughout the series, but hopefully my earlier analysis at least shows that they could be seen throughout, that the series was consistently thinking about what it wanted to convey and how that related to the journeys the characters undertook. What we're left with at Ginka and Luna's conclusion is a story that I think has enough to chew and think about, but above all else is fun. This can be seen through its main cast members, Watanabe's artwork with all his fantastical spreads and depictions of magic, and the world at large. It's a quirky and different kind of fantasy manga that does differentiate itself from a lot of other fantasy works you'll see these days. It's not nearly as rigid in its depiction of what a fantasy world should be. It gets praise, at least from me, for being unique, trying different things, and exploring a narrative beyond the usual stories we see within Jump. On the other hand, this is a double-edged sword, perhaps due to its weirdness, its lack of structure at points, and desire to not adhere to many popular tropes or ideas. Many people found it confusing or hard to follow. There are sequences, especially early on after chapter 1 and during the mine section, which I find don't flow particularly well. We also have all sorts of loose ends like the minigins, and while some mystery surrounding the world is preferable, there's a certain hollowness to the series as many holes are left unfilled. While that doesn't bother me as the central character narrative is solid, I can see it detracting for others. Ginka and Glüna is a series that's a bit messy. It strays from some of the norms of Jump manga, but in the process it leads to a unique enough story that provoked a lot of thoughts. These cancelled series are by far my favourite. Not one that's trying desperately to fit a mold, but one with ideas brimming from it, which it wants to convey, even if it's to its detriment. Moving on, this is one of the biggest reasons why it might have been cancelled. For as cool as it could be, it's quite hard to pin down or stuff into a neat box. I also don't think Watanabe had quite enough writing chops, and their ideas visually, while cool, weren't quite gripping enough to create something that could go completely against the grain and attain a loyal audience. A big turning point may have also been Planet Peak, a fun arc with a great villain and fight, which was followed by a bit of a lull. Locke could have been a very interesting character, being our first non-mage, providing us with some conflict set apart from regular battles, but his personality coupled with the stepping away from other pre-established characters and dropping us into the most banal setting yet, I think was not the best of ideas. Looking at the magazine at the time, both Ginka and Glüna and Tokyo Demon Bride stories were both graced with a decently long run for cancelled manga standards at 29 chapters. Series featuring magic has been popular for the last several years, with us having a bunch now, with Ichi the Witch being a prominent example from Jump, but back then we had Black Clover and Marshall as well. All different series, but there is this magical adventure aspect to them. Those two would also leave the magazine within a few months, and a part of me does think that while Ginka and Glüna wasn't as popular as them, it could have filled the similar role if the timing on everything was a bit different. In general though, I think the series did get a fair shake, which did lead it to a pretty satisfying ending and series overall, which isn't something you always get with Axe Jump manga. Those are just my thoughts on the series and everything pertaining to its themes, characters, and potential cancellation. But what do others think? Are there any perspectives that differ from mine that could give us an even broader view of the series? As always, I've asked the wonderful folks on the Axe Files Office's Discord to give me their thoughts on Ginka and Glüna, so let's hear what they have to say. Many reviews at this time are quite positive, like Chert Frumpus, who describes the series as whimsical fun and a breath of fresh air, wonderfully creative and heartfelt, but hampered by some poorly explained world building. You can find similar feelings amongst many people, with Nedek enjoying its magic and antagonist too. TG stating it was one of their favourite axes due to its appealing art and characters and the mix of genres in action, adventure, and horror. Kinky also brings it up as one of their favourite axes too, mentioning its great fantasy art throughout its world and character designs like Ginka. A couple of people brought up the potential of merchandising of the series, including Full Metal, who think a Ginka plush would go hard, or soft I guess, and that makes me a little sad that we aren't in a world where Ginka plushes are ubiquitous. The design is a definite draw of the series, and most readers seem to really love this quirky snowman. Wildheart Razorfangs brought up some excellent analysis through the comparison of Ginka and Glüna, with the latter being this embodiment of passion, creativity, and curiosity who moves past deeper trauma with this profound sense of hope, letting go of her dear memories in the pursuit to help others and be happy. In contrast, Ginka is someone who indulges in mortal vice in order to cover up their trauma and past, though both end up in a similar place by the end, finding newfound hope. The ways in which they are similar but also different is pretty fascinating, and I think that's what helps make the duo so likable amongst readers. Raise the Fangs also highlights how novel the series is and worth reading due to Luna and her perspective, helping the world feel so vibrant, likening the action to be less typical to a lot of other shonen manga and more imaginative instead. Melons also found the series especially charming, but not without issue. Some core things they point out are the initial pacing woes, stating that it might have been better to nix Beretta and Anemone, plus all the build-up involving them to speedrun to the Mages Guild, as it pretty much does so anyway with strained pacing. I can't help but agree in retrospect, those characters do give us some perspective and build on certain ideas, but not enough, and by the time we reach the second half they disappear mostly anyway. Melon's second issue about the lack of conflict, especially surrounding Luna, is something that might also be fixed by speeding the series along. At least to me, I think it's important to keep the sense of scale the series is going for, where we deal with high level mages from the beginning. If anything, the lack of danger beforehand makes the hero fight much better, but it does make for some awkward plodding around story beforehand. I do want to stress that beside these issues, Melon's feelings are extremely positive, which is a through line you'll see through a lot of reviews for the series, even if I bring up reviews in a criticism-focused context. Violent brings up its initial pace as one of its biggest missteps, it cramming so much into its first chapter, especially with a backstory, training arc, fighting a big monster, while including exposition made the entry to its world a little hard to swallow. Demon Summoning Enthusiast also digs into this, bringing up that it might be due to a lack of confidence in the series and where Watanabe wanted to take it. It's undoubtedly messy, but focusing on the start, I don't think the beginning should have been completely cut, as Demon Summoning Enthusiast suggests, as it's important to lead a story events and ideas. I'd imagine the initial idea was to spend more time to develop the two's bond while having a short training arc and time skip, but in a magazine like Jump, time is a luxury and it often pushes authors to speed up where perhaps they should have stuck to their guns and let things play out. Building on pacing woes, Hallett found that on a reread they felt rushed from place to place, but there being no time to rest and build on what was happening. The chaotic energy that accompanies this is fun, but more nuance would have been appreciated. A big reason why is because they connected to the characters and wanted to dig more into Ginka, who only ever gets expanded on at the very end. Red Ranger Wyan brings up another victim of the series' cancellation, but also its rush pacing. Side characters like Beretta and Anemone are left abandoned halfway through the story, and due to how the series bounced around beforehand, we didn't get much focus on them to begin with. I did my best to try to highlight them in the general story review portion of the video. They are connected to some of the series' central ideas and help make Luna stand out, but as it stands, they end up feeling vestigial. Their stories aren't ever resolved and only serve to complicate and awkwardly pad earlier chapters. The pacing can also result in a lot of confusion, which can be seen in Joshua's review, where they found multiple facets of the world, its characters and magical systems ill-defined. While there's a certain level of chaos that is appropriate to the series, I think it lacks clarity in multiple areas that could have used some smoothing out. Coming in with the most negative review, we have Jesus Flash, who powered through due to the many comments about the series' initial pacing, though found they disliked the series in a general sense. Not necessarily due to it being stupid, ugly, or derivative, but because it mishandled its core ideas. The comment made about it feeling like a bunch of different stories set in this anthology setting is interesting, and I can kind of feel that. The disjointedness of the series, its shaky pacing and frequent locale changes give it this vibe, and sadly it's not a positive feeling. I find this review by Flash so compelling because the focus here on there being a lot of loose ideas that don't quite come together is something I definitely agree with, but my attitude and feelings towards the series overall couldn't be more polarizing. Ideas aren't used to their full potential, though I don't find them thoughtless, especially in comparison to other shonen works. Perhaps this is me being over-analytical and spending way more time with the series than anyone else, and stringing things together that fit for me, though being able to do that with the series at all is preferable to one that's way too basic with nothing to chew on. Hong put a lot of emphasis on Ginka and Luna's magical world and sense of wonder, not only highlighting how expressive it could be through its magic, especially Luna, but mentioning the horror aspects too, likely referring to Hera. I think it's wonderful that we get to see such a broad spectrum of magic. You can take it in so many directions, from whimsical to terrifying and even beautiful. Cerulean gave a very balanced review, but put a lot of focus on the beautiful illustration that filled the series, listing numerous locations that stood out, as well as some of the horror elements that surrounded villains like Hera or Mangaka. Something these last two reviews have in common as well is them highlighting how good the ending is, leading to the series being much more memorable than it otherwise would have been if it had gotten an Adventure Continues style ending. Instead, it makes that the actual point, and the adventure continuing is a substantive emotional payoff because it actually means something. On the opposite spectrum to these, Iliades found the series largely unnoteworthy and bring up other recent series handling their magical elements a lot better, though they still enjoyed the ending. Chima wasn't initially interested in the series, but found themselves somewhat absorbed by the end, giving praise to Watanabe's art and his simple yet fun characters. A portion of the review I want to highlight here is how it tackled its ending, with many people giving praise for how it handles Luna's memory loss. It would admittedly hit harder if the manga were allowed more time to build up events surrounding it, but even so it sticks out to people and provides the series with an endpoint that most seem to be satisfied with. Benro Black gives a long critical review highlighting many of the series' pitfalls and odd decisions that mar the series, from its pacing to its lackluster characters who add little to the story. But despite this, they share an enthusiastic love for the series that sounds kindled by its core cast members, which they dote on at points throughout this review. From Luna's infectious curiosity and creativity to Ginka's complex character and rambunctiousness, they both make the series fun in a way that makes it hard for some not to love. Its bitter ending is also touched on positively here that helped anyone who did get attached to Ginka and Luna reflect on the series. What it tried to convey with its adventure and attitude that magic can do anything, only for that to eventually be subverted somewhat. There is still hope though, and like Fenrir Black writes, the bond and relationships we share with each other are magical in their own way. It's a lovely note to end the series on. While there was some that didn't enjoy the series and many who found fault with its pacing or sidecast, there was an outpour of love for the series that was tinged in whimsy and wonder. It's not much of a surprise to me, as a lot of series in recent years that have engaged people the most have been magical adventure series, many of which people have brought up in their reviews as benchmarks to compare Ginka and Luna to. Things like Jump's own Ichi the Witch or the fantastic Witch Hat Atelier. These are admittedly very high bars to meet, and it would be great if Ginka and Luna reached those, but even if it doesn't, I'm glad it made such an impact on many people anyway. More than a lot of series I cover on the X-Files, this one was just plain fun. Post Ginka and Luna, Watanabe took a bit of a break before returning with Kijin Aslan in Jump Giga's summer issue of 2025. I don't know much about this one, but it seems to be a fantasy manga focusing on the story of the hero beyond killing the Demon Lord. It even got a color page in that issue too. Reception to it, from what I've seen, has also been quite positive, so hopefully we see Watanabe return sometime with a new work within Jump. And that brings this video on Ginka and Luna to a close. A work quite well loved and rich in creativity that led me to thinking about it a lot. If you enjoyed, please consider liking the video and subscribing, since I make videos like this quite frequently. I have a few X-Files now and all kinds of different cancelled manga, mostly from within Shonen Jump, but also a few from outside of it too. So if there's a cancelled Jump manga you remember enjoying, I might have made a video on it already. I also make videos on all kinds of other manga, especially older stuff from Jump, like in my History of Shonen Jump series, where I look at what was serialized in the magazine year by year. Right now I'm approaching the end of the 90s, so manga you'll likely be familiar with, like One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, and Naruto will start appearing. As always, a huge thanks goes out to the many patrons of the channel who without I wouldn't be able to make videos like this. Your support really makes a difference, and it's patrons who are responsible for picking the manga I often cover, like Ginka and Luna. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get access to polls where you can suggest and vote on what manga I make videos on in this X-Files series. You'll also be thanked at the end of my videos and gain access to a vault of patron exclusive videos that are more experimental, silly, or focused on my first impressions of various new Shonen Jump manga as they come out. The only difference between any of the tiers is that at the $3 tier or higher, you'll also get a unique little doodle drawn by me to represent you in the credits of my videos, like the following whimsical people. Thank you, Trinity, Jade, Kazuku-Gairu, Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Fako, Yellowtail, Lace Slogget, Chris P. Bacon, Cho Henshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Yuzakura Psycho, Wurzel, Violent, Cactus, Joni, City Name E, Vino Burrito, Caffeine Dad, Cryonaut, Crash, 41IZ, Hong, Jamie Reynolds, Manu, Poke Emblem, James Miller, Jopa Monkey, Just a Virus, Star Sphinx, PK Broly, Fenrir Black, Elijah Espinoza, Neo Humanoid, Mark Nielsen, Electro Pirate, Jay Vasso, Three Frogs in a Trenchcoat, Sir Flash, Gay Shark, Slimy Okra, Giddista, Wavy Sky, TG Talks Manga, John Jerry 722, Andrew, Xenomat, Missile, Tara Elizabeth, Stratomega 13, Dennis Tambik, Jubei, Lise, Frog Dude, Back on Earth, Yustin Maikage, Papa Aeon, Gwenta, Mamina, Nozarashi, VHS Enthusiast, Kaito 4, Hilltop, Bako Draws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, Jonathan Dragonet, John Sanford, Color, Jaime, Strawberry Proshone, Vaz, Palette, Ruiner, Juice, Kurumi Nox, Eric Goski, Mr. Shira, Grizz Exploder, Dextora, Eni Oshowo, Cheese, Emmy, Benjamin, Tenmaku Lover, Taifumi Studios, Ignate, Iliades, Gyrus, VHS Enthusiast, Kanojo, King Snacks, Sidrune, Daniel, Melons, and Ichiyu Zulu. Thank you all so much for being patrons, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.